Ah yes, the infamous double-clicking issue. Never thought I'd experience this myself, but it finally happened. What exactly is this double-clicking issue? Well, basically it's the phenomenon where you do a single click but the mouse thinks you are doing a double-click action. You'll see what I mean here. If the box turns red, it indicates that an unintended double-click was detected. Apparently, this is a very common issue with not just Logitech mouses, but any mouse that has the Omron switches, specifically those that were made in China, or the part number D2CF-F-7NK, which are the switches in my mouse. There's a YouTuber that has covered this issue in great detail, and I highly recommend spending at least an hour of your time to watch that if you're interested. Since my mouse is suffering from this dreaded issue, I'm faced with two options. Either 1. I buy another mouse, or 2. Attempt to fix this myself. I don't like the idea of throwing away perfectly working electronics, so I went with the second option to repair it myself. Besides, even if I buy another mouse, at some point the problem will come back. For me, I think it's more feasible to replace a $5 switch than having to spend tons of money for a brand new mouse. Of course, before starting the journey to solder a replacement switch, I needed to do my research. From what I've gathered, most people that modified their mouse opted to use the Omron switches that were made in Japan, or the specific part number D2F-01F. And so the hunt begins to buy the replacement switches I need, as well as a basic soldering kit since I don't have one. After 1 week of waiting, the replacement switch finally came in. Except, the seller sent me the wrong part. I placed an order for the D2F-01F, but instead I ended up receiving the D2F-01FL, which is completely incompatible with my mouse. On the D2F-01FL, it has this larger plunger, while my mouse has a smaller plunger. Well, I guess I have to delay the project for another week while I get my refund and look for another seller. After a few days of looking around, I was able to find another seller. However, they only had the D2F-01, this one without the F at the end. Not gonna lie, it was tough making the decision, but ultimately I am desperate to get a functioning mouse again. So I went with this part. Honestly, the difference between this and the D2F-01F is very minimal. The important thing is that the switches are made in Japan. Once again, after a week of waiting, the replacement part finally came in. And a bit of a disclaimer, don't think of this video as a tutorial on soldering because I have zero experience when it comes to this. To start off, we'll take apart the mouse. The process is really easy. Remove the pads and a couple of screws. Once we're inside, you can see all of the switches corresponding to each input on the mouse. However, our main focus is the left and right click buttons. Those are the buttons we are replacing today. To remove the switches from the PCB, first is to fill the pins with new solder. This will make it easier to remove later on. At first, I tried to remove it by heating up the solder and prying it with my tweezers, but that ended up being very difficult. In fact, during the process, I ended up breaking one of the pads. Sort of. Anyways, I ended up using the desoldering pump to remove the solder, and that one made it so much easier. After the massive pain removing the right click button, it's time to solder in the new Japanese Omron switch to the PCB. The process is very simple. Start by soldering the middle pin, that way it will act as a support to keep it firmly placed on the board. And of course, we follow that up with soldering the rest of the pins. Now on to testing the switch. I did say earlier that I almost ended up breaking the pads. The question is, does it actually work? And the answer to that is yes, the right click is working perfectly fine. Phew, I was a bit worried there. And so I continued the same process for the left click button. As you can see, using the desoldering pump made it so much easier to remove. And once again, popped in the new Japanese Omron switch, soldering the pins, and done. So now it's time to reassemble the mouse and do the same test as before. Alright, just to prove to you guys that the double clicking issue is gone, so let's reproduce the same steps from earlier. As you can see, the box is now turning red, which means that our double clicking issue is finally resolved. I have successfully repaired my own mouse. The one thing I would say about this switch over the original is that this one feels a bit snappier. The clicking sound is also different on the Japanese switch versus the Chinese switch. It will get some getting used to, that's for sure. Other than that, the process is surprisingly easy to do. If you are on the fence on modifying your own mouse, don't be afraid to try. As I've shown in the video, even with inexperience in soldering, I was still able to repair my own mouse. I feel proud of myself despite messing up on the desoldering process, but the important thing is that it is fixed and it feels great to have a mouse that isn't acting on its own. That's all for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.